by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land and pay respect to the elders, past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. Everyone's present. No apologies, no leave. Nil absent. Just sorry, the Deputy CEO's away sick. Just remind the members of any conflict, if you have any conflict of interest that comes up, make note of that on the forms and declare your interest. Thank you. Item 3, Officers Report, CEO, please.
Okay, so before you've got your agenda paper on the long-term financial plan, and it's quite lengthy and obviously goes into many aspects of what we've been through over the last 12 months. So I'll take it as read, but what additional information I will give you while you're here is that I have provided you with some draft motions for you to consider once you've obviously discussed the matter, and subject to that decision there is a draft letter for your consideration as well. Again, depending on your decision in regards to the long-term financial plan tonight. Otherwise, Mayor, I'll hand it back to you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Now, if everyone's happy, we'll abandon the meeting procedures and just go and do general discussion so we get a better idea and people can have their say without having to go through the official formal motions and speaking times, etc., etc. So is everyone happy to do that?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll do that. Okay. So where do you want to start? Survey?
Yep, happy to go through that. So your paper discusses both surveys, so just going back to the one that we carried out towards the beginning of last year. That particular survey had a 51% return rate and came back with with an 83% no vote. That particular survey obviously asked ratepayers if they were willing to pay a levy of somewhere between 10 and 15% to cover the repairs and ongoing maintenance that will be required for the jetty. Our more recent survey went out to all ratepayers again, but we only had about a 25% return rate on that particular survey. That came back with a 60% no vote. I think maybe that is representative of the fact that whilst it was still proposing over time an 11% increase to cover the repairs and maintenance on the jetties, that was obviously applied over a number of years, so it may not have had the same look and feel as that first survey, but they are consistent in their responses. Yeah, happy to take any questions on the survey, but I think we've run through sort of the consultation and engagement process as we went through as well, so we've got a good understanding of how we approach that.
Just on that recent survey, for some reason some members of the public here think when we ask for their opinion on a survey, it's a free-for-all for them to have their offensive, disgusting comments thrown at council. I was personally disgusted by some of the comments, and totally unreasonable. And the people of the community of the whole district need to have a look at themselves, because the survey was there for a reason, to get what they wanted out of a difficult situation. To then have a personal attack on councillors and staff is totally unwarranted, and they should have a look at themselves. Thank you. We've got off the chest.
comments, the attack that I had from the councillor when I queried the taking question 3 out of the survey. It was terrible.
What was terrible?
The letter that I received from a council member, which I think we read. I think all members would have read it. Disgusting.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't believe that was warranted. And some of the replies back and forth on that, on the particular website, shall we say. The best thing I heard over recent months was Australia Day, where the recipient said they should be taken down and to just be called Tumby Road, not Ramp. Unfortunately, we can't regulate what's said in that forum because we're not in charge of it.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree. There were some comments in different directions that weren't necessary. So, but here we are in a situation that wasn't our problem, that we as a council, some new people here got landed with in the previous council. And I don't like blaming previous councils. I hate it when politicians do that, but that's the facts. And we, unfortunately, are going to be left holding the decision. So. Let's move on to what we want to do.
So we're obviously needing direction from you tonight to either accept the long-term financial plan that went out for consultation with no changes, or to direct us to make changes, which the Deputy CEO will then do and bring back to a later meeting for you to consider and adopt at that time. So, yeah, really open to your feedback and direction in regards to what you'd like to see either adopted tonight or brought back.
I'm happy to leave the discussion and so at the December council meeting, December 24, after the prudential report was presented to council, I just want to reiterate some of the comments that I made at that meeting. I believe that everyone would like to retain the jetty. I don't think there's any doubt about that, if it was financially possible. It's been an extremely important infrastructure for our district on many levels, and it's certainly not our choice to lose it. It was my opinion at that time, and still my opinion, which I think has been backed up by the survey that's been received, that we can no longer afford the huge impost on council finances to remediate the state-owned infrastructure. I believe that we need to advise the state government that the financial burden is too great, and I think the letter that as we have had in draft, I think is a very good letter outlining all those needs. I think we need to stress, which it has, that the town and the community need a jetty, just like our city counterparts. Probably more so, but we simply do not have the rate base to finance their asset. If it was an annual lease or an option, if that was an option, but to fully maintain the infrastructure is beyond rural coastal council with foreshore erosion, deteriorating roads, heavy vehicles utilising the roads, mining and ports also into our equation. The jetty is not a local attraction but a state and Australia-wide, and the impost is just not equitable. We need some assistance to provide the infrastructure for all, whether that be a statewide levy or some other equitable solution. We've tried to bring what we could do to the table with the state government, but I believe it would be at the detriment of the rest of the district to continue to fund something which is a benefit wider than just our small community. Sadly, I believe we're limited in our options. If we ask the state government about long-term management program for the state-owned assets, they don't seem to have one for their assets. No long-term plan. Maybe there's possibilities to look at replacing a jetty where the old jetty was. This was a swimming jetty prior to its removal. To have a purpose-built jetty would enable us to access for disabled, wheelchair gophers and the like. Our youth and children would have a suitable, sustainable structure that used for the next generation and beyond. I believe that there is a disparaging lack of support for areas that don't have a rating, don't have the rating numbers. Our farming areas provide food security for our state. However, our rural areas are not being supported when it comes to equitability for funding. Further options will need to be looked at once the state government makes a decision about the ongoing maintenance of the rural jetties. I do believe the survey has given council clear directives that our ratepayers do not want to have increased rates to pay for a government-owned asset. The survey also indicated higher priorities than jetty, one being the foreshore and roads. If it had been a yes decision, it would have been inequitable for our district. The farming sector would be unfairly bearing the biggest percentage of that decision. Not only that, the increase placed on unsustainable burden on lower income ratepayers and put our council in a vulnerable position financially. I believe that the drawings and plans for the foreshore area should be finalised as soon as possible to enable funding to be sourced so that we can progress, so progression can be made on the foreshore. And I took this from one of the ratepayers' responses, saying yes and then saying being financially viable is difficult to say in the one sentence, and that's what I believe. I believe we need to advise the state government of our decision and the reasons that include both jetties, including the future funding for the long-term financial jetty for Port Neale, and work towards that. So that will be the direction that I will take in voting.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Just a question for me. We've been discussing the jetties, etc., with the Kingston District Council, York Peninsula Council, SA Council, coastal councils. Has there been any progress from there? Or is there further meetings to be or discussion to be held with them?
Yeah. So a couple of things are coming up. We're still trying to negotiate terms for a renewal lease and the funding agreement. So there's a letter going to DIT in regards to that based on some legal advice that we've got. The local government mutual liability scheme has looked at those documents as well and had a meeting with Norman Waterhouse, our lawyers, to discuss concerns. I wasn't privy to that meeting. I didn't realise, I wasn't aware that it had occurred until afterwards, so I'm just trying to find out what the outcome of that was. But I am expecting something back from the mutual liability scheme in any case. And the SA Postal Councils Alliance, I spoke with their EO yesterday, and he has put a call out to all councils with jetties, at least with jetties, to have a meeting to update us, or update generally all of them on where we're at, and to discuss what's happening with them, because councils such as Lower Air, their 2 jetties come out of lease this week. We're not aware of what they're doing. I believe Port Germain are looking at potentially handing theirs back. Or Mountain Michael's handing Port Germain back, but I'm not, that isn't a decision of council as yet. And I know Kingston's very much in our similar position to us, in that they will probably need to go back to the state government and say that it's not going to work for them, but they're still working through their credential reports. So.
Right.
On that point, I've been studying the lease, and it's not clear whether the Jet's offer is to renew the existing lease or in a new lease. Can you
it would be a new lease because there are no renewal provisions in that current lease. So it would have to be a brand new lease.
So, but the letter says renew the lease as it is,
Yes,
the
but,
existing lease.
yeah. But none of the councils are happy with that because of the provisions of that lease are so unfair. And certainly from a commercial aspect, it's not something that I would be recommending this council enter into, and I certainly know that the mutual liability scheme has significant concerns around the clauses in that lease.
But the members, us members would have to see that lease.
Yes, you
See
will.
the negotiations, or we should be aware of the negotiations that you people are doing. Yeah, after all, it's us that's going to make the decision whether, well, I think I've made my decision, whether we renew the lease or not. But if we don't know what the lease is, how can we make that decision?
Well, obviously we're still trying to negotiate the commercial terms of that lease. And we're seeking, sorry?
It's been a long time.
Well, unfortunately, dealing with government departments does take a long time. And we're getting legal advice and advice from our mutual liability schemes lawyers as well in regards to the terms of that. And once it's in a position where we feel that it is presentable, and then we can raise any concerns we've got with the lease at that point in time.
Yes, I've been studying about this 30% original condition and the lease, or it's got to make it to that at the start of the lease. So if you start a new lease and it's exactly the same as it was, that means that the leaseor, that is Dick, would have to put in 30% of the original condition before we start our lease. But then again, we are supposed to give it back to them in 30% of the original condition. So
That's, yeah, the piles, yeah.
well, more than the piles, I think.
No, it actually states the piles.
I thought it says a bit more than that. But anyway, so it is quite hard to get your head around it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very old lease.
But I still say that we as the members need to see that lease before we make any decision. Either way. Well, no, if we make a decision to renew the lease.
If you're making a decision to, I mean, there's certainly, I couldn't see any CEO bringing a lease that puts the council at a lesser position than that one does at the moment to you for acceptance.
I keep looking at it and thinking that for 15 years, and there's the approximate cost of $14.7 million, and we're still going to end up in 15 years' time with an old jetty. And we keep throwing good money after bad at it, and to my mind, putting it back into the state government's hand is the most sensible way to go about it, as far as I'm concerned, because A, we as a council can't afford it, B, the public have actually voted into a no situation, quite definitely on that side of it. So my thoughts are that unless there's a big change from the state government as far as the funding, because I still don't believe that even if we put 2.4 into it, the state government put 2.4 into it, we'll still only get halfway through the jetty and we'll find that there's more issues, and it already got shown up at Port Neal with that jetty where we thought 400,000 was going to do the job and ended up being 1.3. So that's, and it's still not finished. And that is a very, very scary thought if we end up still with a jetty that's half to 3/4 done, and we are still out, and we're out of pocket even further. So
the other issue is if we could take on that jetty, or both the jetties again, there will be no finances, spare finances for any other works in the community for the next 15 years. That's the part that scares me. That if a curb in the main street starts crumbling, then there's no money to get that fixed for 15 years.
I think, yeah, and on top of that as well, I mean, we only have to go back a few years ago when we had a lot of rain, a lot of roads got damaged. Roads actually got put off for a year or two because of the expenses of actually repairing everything else as well. And yeah, there's a lot of roads, and it got brought up in the survey a number of times that the roads are a major issue in a number of areas, and I'd much rather be focusing on that with the funds that the locals are actually paying through their rate system.
And the people that use those roads pay a fairly big majority of the roads.
They also have got a very good way and means of actually producing a lot of money from the properties that are on those roads as well. And the majority of the road damage that actually gets done is by, let's be honest, trucks, and that are actually delivering grain from those growers and those farmers as well. They have a means of actually making an income where someone in the town doesn't.
I could reiterate everything the Deputy Mayor said, but I won't simply say that I agree with everything that she has said. I would emphasise the inequity of the way the state government is handling recreational jetties, and that they're maintaining some of the metro ones at no cost to councils, and that is just it's simply not fair. It's inequitable. I also query some of the commercial jetties with only a minor amount of research that I doubt very much whether all the commercial jetties are actually paying their way. So there's inequity in that as well, which needs to be fully disclosed by the state government, and pressure needs to be put on them to do that. So that's the way I'll be voting.
Yeah, I agree with Julie, Rick and Trevor. State asset. Our community can't afford it over the next 15 years. So I'll be voting, yeah, leases get returned, jetties get returned, state government.
I think we've got to be led by the community. It's been a no. I'm very disappointed that question 3 wasn't left in one I'll say, because that gave the community a chance to say, no, we don't want the extra rates for the jetty, but we'd like to see it retained somehow. Now that may be going back to the government, beg in hand, and offering them a certain amount per year or something. But I mean, we've got this no, and it's a no. We haven't got a no, but yes if you do something else.
I totally agree with what you're saying, except the fact that we took that question out on your advice at the meeting. You were the one that suggested that there was a disparity. You were giving hope with one hand and taking away with the other hand. So we took it out. The CEO rang me and asked me about it. Each one of you councillors got given an email to say whether you had a problem with it being taken out. Everyone replied except yourself.
I didn't see any replies.
Well, everyone else replied saying that they agreed that that question came out.
On the email?
No.
Oh, I did not see that.
No, wasn't in it?
No, I did not see that. There might have been phone calls. Normally I see email track when everybody says something and CC'd through that. I'm the only one to reply straight away that I've seen it. I didn't see it for a couple of days. And it's that important an issue. I think we should have been text on our private phone numbers as well as emailed on our council email.
So I didn't see a response from Councillor Hudson.
You did. I beg your pardon. I've got it written out here. I emailed you that. Well, why do you think I got that letter back from Councillor Cots? Because I CC'd all of you into it.
That was after.
Pardon?
That was after the fact.
No, not Facebook. This was a letter back from Councillor Cots, and you all would have seen it.
Yes, that was after it had been approved and after Christmas and it had already been sent out.
Yes, about 5 or 7 days after you put the email out. I don't look at my council emails every day. If it's such an important thing, I feel you should have texted all on our private phone. I mean, you texted us and said Merry Christmas or something, so
Councillor
surely
Hudson,
it's
with all due
important.
respect, you've provided with a council email and a council computer, and it is part of your role to check it.
Yes, this is Christmas period. I'll say again, it's that important, you should have, I feel you should have texted us or rang us each one and said, look, there's an email. The mayor did that to us a couple of times recently when there was an important email. And that's what I'm disappointed. That's all I need to say.
So,
It's very, very poorly organised.
Nonetheless, it was your idea in the first place.
It wasn't my idea to take 3 out, it was my idea to make question 3 clearer. In fact, question 2 refers to the revised long-term plan. Question 3 refers to the long-term plan. Different scenario.
so what we needed to find out as part of that survey was, were people happy, yes or no, with the proposed rate increase?
We found that out, haven't we?
Yeah, so no, they're not happy with the proposed rate increase. We know that people want to keep the jetties. I don't think anybody
Well, do
will.
we? I don't think there's some people
I
that-
think that's a fairly, I think if people had the choice to keep the jetties and not pay for them,
Well, that's what I wanted in the
Absolutely.
survey. And that's what I
So-
think
but
question 3 referred
keeping
to.
that in the survey was not something that council could actually respond to. We couldn't actually deliver that as an option.
Well, I think we
So it was
should.
misleading.
Well, anyway, we're going around circles here, we need
I
to go
haven't
back.
had anyone in the community not want the jetty.
Everyone wants to check, I agree with that. And that's what I've been saying right from the word go, since I've been in this chair.
Spoken to.
If we had the finances available to us, that we'd fix the jetties tomorrow. And, you know, I've seen this jetty being used over Christmas in the summer months and the Port Mill one being used just as much. And I'll stand corrected, but I can't imagine anyone standing here and saying that they want a jetty here.
No, I think you're right. No. I'd like to see the community say that. And I've been having a discussion with someone on the phone before I come. It's very important that the community supports the jetty no matter what we do.
Yeah. And look, Bob, if we say no to this, it's not going to stop us from pushing the government harder and harder and harder to try and get some sort of financial assistance to keep these to get it going. It's not as though if we say no that they're going to come on the bulldozer and pull it down tomorrow.
But if we say no, does that mean we're saying no, we won't put any money into it at all?
At this point.
We're not going to back their 2.4 million, put it that way.
No, well, I have had this idea, and I did say in the meeting that I thought we could do it over a period of years. And maybe that's what we could do, but even the $800,000 a year over a period of years, maybe that's attainable if we knew we were right for 15 years, but the engineers say we're not, we have to come back again and again and again.
The bottom line of the whole thing, I believe, is no matter which way you look at the jetty here, is it's 115 years old. If you do another 15 years, it's 130, and there's another $14 million gone on this jetty. At some stage, the government have got to realise that the jetty is at end of life, full stop.
Yeah.
And probably the only option would be to build a new jetty, like Deputy Mayor suggested.
I've said before and I'll say again, it's not 115 years old, a lot of it's been replaced over the years.
Whichever way we look at it, it's an old jetty.
Yes. And it's money to keep going.
Yeah.
But I did think perhaps we could do it over 3. In fact, I've talked to the minister's men about it. About 3 years, and they said they couldn't see why not. I personally talked to them in Adelaide and in Port Lincoln when we had that meeting in Port Lincoln. But even 800,000 a year for 3 years is,
But then you won't get the 2.4 mil.
oh, you would. 800,000 for 3 years is 2.4.
But from the state government.
Yeah, and then we have to find 2.4 to back it up.
Yeah, I'm saying 800,000 a year for 3 years, and they would match 800 a year for those 3 years. That was my plan. But I'm starting to think,
That's
after
the-
having a discussion on the phone tonight, maybe even that's, yeah.
You're suggesting that the state government would actually come to the party as far as, or the suggestion to the state government would be that they would come to the party 800,000 a year.
I put that to Tone's second right-hand man, he said he couldn't see why not. But it's not his decision anyway, it's probably his decision.
So we wrote to DIT and put a number of scenarios to them in regards to how we could approach this, including doing a shorter jetty or a new jetty, and they came back and they said the only way we'll get the $2.4 million is if we remediate the full jetty at one time. Not a shorter jetty, not a new jetty, nothing else. So I just don't see, having had that in writing, how they could justify then saying, but yes, you can do it in a piecemeal approach.
We didn't ask you that, did we?
Well, I've asked, I wrote to
But anyway,
them, so-
that was my suggestion. If we couldn't get, obviously we couldn't get the 2.4 straight off, so that was my suggestion. And maybe my suggestion now is if we don't renew the lease, which looks like we're going to decide, we, in any further negotiations, we might say we're prepared to put in, I don't know, a certain figure per year, maybe 300,000 for our jetties. It was in the past, maybe 30,000, wouldn't it? But
So our initial approach to DIT under the SA Jetties renewal application was to approach this in a manner of not dissimilar to what you're suggesting, and that is a long-term lease whereby we paid, say, $300,000 a year to repay them our share of the repair costs. And they said no. And that's when they put the offer to us of the 2.4 based on the terms that we've got before us now.
It's not just the 2.4. What they're saying we're going to have to pay over the next 15 years. That's the original. Yeah. And then after 15 years we're left with what? Mm-hmm.
well, we would be left with it, the government would be left with it. And we'll be left with it.
If we take any money from them, they're going to make us sign something to say that we're responsible for the next 15 years.
If we say yes, basically over the next 15 years, we're going to be paying $13 million and be back in the same position we're in now, right now in 15 years' time. Do we handball that over to the next council? I think it'd be irresponsible. At some stage, you've got to make a tough decision and say, I'm sorry, Mr. Governor, you can have your jetty back.